In 1942, the United States government brought together the most brilliant group of scientists and engineers under the secretive title, the Manhattan Project, to create the deadliest weapon the world has ever seen, the atomic bomb. Set up in January 1943, it was led by a complicated but charismatic physicist, J. Robert Oppenheimer. The Manhattan Project was one of the major successes in the field of nuclear science, and was the perfect combination of science, industry, and technology. This coordinated effort in research, engineering, and construction, which assembled the greatest minds, was known as the Manhattan Project. The project left its footmarks behind by influencing science, world politics, and our planet Earth. Here are 6 interesting facts about the Manhattan Project and the first atomic bomb. The first, why Manhattan Project? Despite the name of the Manhattan Project, the bulk of the work conducted during its existence didn't take place in Manhattan. The Manhattan Project took place at 3 primary locations across the country: Hanford, Washington, Los Alamos, New Mexico, and Oak Ridge, Tennessee. During the project's beginning, President Roosevelt had assigned the project to the Army, and Major General Leslie R. Groves was put in charge. He took up residence in Manhattan initially to draw on the nearby Corps of Engineers division. The project was centered around Manhattan for a variety of reasons. It was the home of Columbia University, where most of the theoretical research took place. Among the scientists who received this early funding were Dr. Leo Szilard and Dr. Enrico Fermi, 2 scientists at Columbia University studying isotope separation. The presence of the Army Corps of Engineers North Atlantic Division, and also Stone & Webster, the top contractor for the project, kept their main office in Manhattan. Initially it was named Development of Substitute Materials, which later changed to Manhattan Engineer District to make it less suspicious and following the Army Corps of Engineers tradition of naming projects after the city where they are located. Later, as the project expanded and the need for multiple sites and laboratories became evident, the Army began to move away from Manhattan. However, the name followed them. Later on, the district part was used less and less until the Army began calling the project as the Manhattan Project. Number 2. Albert Einstein's role in the Manhattan Project. The history of the Manhattan Project is often told as beginning with the Einstein-Szilard letter. The Einstein-Szilard letter was drafted by physicist Leo Szilard and Eugene Wigner. Einstein only signed it for name value, and was sent to President Roosevelt in August of 1939. It urged the military to investigate atomic energy for military purposes, and to accelerate the mining of uranium. Moreover, the letter also warned about the probable chance that Germany might be working on a nuclear bomb project as well. Roosevelt received the letter and decided to take action, creating the Advisory Committee on Uranium and the Office of Scientific Research and Development. This was the very beginning of the U.S. government supporting research into uranium and would ultimately lead to the Manhattan Project, which started in 1942. Despite signing the Einstein-Szilard letter, Albert Einstein played no role in the research carried out by the Manhattan Project. He was denied security clearance in 1940 because of leftist anti-war leanings and had no knowledge of the bomb's development, and later claimed that if he had known Germany wasn't close to developing a bomb, he never would have signed the letter. Number 3. 3 centers of operation. The Manhattan Project had 3 main sites. Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Oak Ridge, Tennessee served as the headquarters of the nationwide project. It served as the main production plant, which produced an enriched uranium needed to create an atomic bomb. 3 separate uranium enrichment technologies were pursued in parallel. A pilot reactor and chemical separation plant were also constructed at Oak Ridge to produce a limited amount of plutonium. Much of the project's expense came from the Oak Ridge site. Hanford, Washington. Only 6 months after breaking ground on the Oak Ridge plutonium pilot plant, an enormous industrial complex for producing plutonium was built at Hanford, Washington. The complex had huge production-scale reactors, chemical separation plants, and fuel fabrication facilities. Despite the speed at which the facilities were engineered and built, production at both Oak Ridge and Hanford sites were slow and difficult. It was not until mid-1945 that enough enriched uranium and plutonium were available for construction for the first atomic bombs. Los Alamos, New Mexico. In early 1943, General Groves set up a bomb design and development laboratory at Los Alamos, New Mexico, with some of the world's foremost scientists under the leadership of J. Robert Oppenheimer. The Los Alamos Laboratory was the project's most significant research center. The Los Alamos site was a remotely located laboratory sat atop the Pajarito Plateau in an isolated area in northern New Mexico. The first ever detonation of a nuclear bomb in history was achieved in New Mexico when the Trinity test was performed. Number 4. The bombs. The Manhattan Project produced two different types of bombs, Little Boy and Fat Man. The code names referred to their shapes. The former, small and compact, and the latter, large and rotund. Little Boy was uranium-fueled and Fat Man was a plutonium bomb. The uranium and plutonium bombs had vastly different designs and working principles. The uranium bomb was never tested before actually dropping due to barely accumulating enough enriched uranium for just one bomb. In the early stages of the Manhattan Project, considerable research and attention was placed on designing a plutonium-based bomb, but with a working principle same as the uranium bomb. The work was codenamed Thin Man. Thin Man was abandoned due to a number of difficulties experienced during research. The first ever detonation of a nuclear bomb in history was achieved in New Mexico, when the Trinity test was performed on July 16, 1945. The code name for the test, Trinity, was given by Oppenheimer, who was inspired by the poetry of John Donne. The bomb was nicknamed the Gadget. The Gadget was a test version of the plutonium bomb, used in the Fat Man later. The United States dropped the Little Boy atomic bomb on Hiroshima, Japan, on August 6, 1945. The U.S. then dropped the plutonium-filled Fat Man bomb on Nagasaki, Japan, on August 9th. Number 5. The Top Secret Project. The Manhattan Project was a top-secret project because the U.S. government was worried that enemies like Germany and Japan would learn about the nuclear technology and could use it in escalating their own nuclear weapons. The U.S. Army built several top-secret factories just to produce uranium and turn it into plutonium. The biggest secret of the Manhattan Project was Los Alamos. The tiny town in New Mexico was remote enough for the Army to keep its activity secret. They turned the barren desert mesa into a massive laboratory, with housing for families and dormitories for employees. It was protected by layers of secrecy, with not a word breathed to the outside world. Even the name Los Alamos was highly classified, and it existed on no map or survey. It was remote and could only be accessed by one road, which was unmarked and had no street name. The most important nuclear facility in the world had no official name and only a P.O. box as an address. It was simply called Site Y, or The Hill, by those living there. Things were so secretive around the test site that workers often did not know what they were doing. In some cases, they didn't find out till years later. Residents without clearance didn't know what was being built, and even spouses of high-level scientists were completely in the dark. The word bomb was never used, and the atomic bombs were being called gadgets. Government intelligence agents were everywhere in the nearby site of Santa Fe, which served as an embarkation point for scientists who came in from the rest of the country. Oppenheimer and the other scientists, many of whom had ties to the Communist Party or organized labor, were placed under constant surveillance. The authorities made strict warnings to punish anyone who would disclose the secrets of the project. Punishment included rigorous prison of 10 years or a $10,000 fine. Despite all the security measures, several members of the Manhattan Project spied for the Soviet Union, including two high-ranking physicists at Los Alamos, Theodore Hall and Klaus Fuchs. Because of espionage, Russia's atomic bomb program developed a carbon copy of Fat Man in less than 4 years. When the existence of this nationwide secret project was revealed to the American people following the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, most were astounded to learn that such a far-flung, government-run top-secret operation existed, with physical properties, payroll, and a labor force comparable to the automotive industry. At its peak, the project employed 130,000 workers, and by the end of the war had spent more than $2.2 billion, almost $25 billion in today's money. Number 6. Was the project a success? The Manhattan Project ushered in the age of nuclear weapons. Despite the cost of the project and all the scientific challenges that occurred, the Manhattan Project was deemed a success due to its scientific contribution. However, whether the project was really a success is more of an ethical question than a factual one. The project delivered the only 2 atomic bombs ever detonated in warfare, with the total estimated deaths from those detonations and radiation poisoning being somewhere around 400,000. The bombings in Japan in 1945 brought an abrupt end to the war and potentially saved many lives, but it still poses a problematic question as to whether they were truly necessary and if they were morally correct. The Manhattan Project had been sold to the scientists as the U.S.'s only option for defeating a nuclear-armed Nazi Germany. But by 1944, it was clear that Germany had no bomb and the Allies would beat them without the deployment of atomic weapons. On May 8, 1945, Germany unconditionally surrendered to the Allies during World War II in Europe. With Germany out of the war, and the Allies turned their full attention to the war in the Pacific. The scientists pushed back when they realized their government might use the bomb in Japan. Many of the physicists lobbied for the U.S. government to show its hand and use the atomic bomb as a bargaining chip to end the war in Japan, which had no atomic program. They hoped the revelation of the bomb's existence would preclude the need to actually use it. A petition was written in July 1945, signed by 70 scientists, to the new U.S. President Harry S. Truman, asking him to refrain from using the atomic weapons in the war. However, the petition was declined and never received by the president. The Secretary of State, James F. Burns, along with Oppenheimer and other military and scientific leaders, who were appointed by the Secretary of War to advise the president on the bomb's use, recommended deploying the bomb immediately. Oppenheimer at that time notably failed to convey the staunch opposition felt by so many of the Manhattan Project scientists. The Trinity test convinced its witnesses of their invention's apocalyptic power. Oppenheimer famously quoted a verse, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds," from the sacred Hindu text the Bhagavad Gita. When atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki a few weeks later, the news inspired an uncomfortable mix of jubilation and regret at Los Alamos. Some, including Oppenheimer, became increasingly depressed by the destructive outcome of their work. After the U.S. deployed the atomic bombs, scientists such as Szilard, Teller, Oppenheimer, Einstein, and several others became a crusader against nuclear weapons, particularly the hydrogen bomb, which is 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bombs used against Japan. Despite Oppenheimer's opposition, the bomb was developed and successfully tested in 1952. Some would argue the bombings were a war crime. Others would say they were justified and necessary. Without the success of the Manhattan Project, who knows what would have been the first country to use a nuclear bomb in World War II. The project itself was a highly significant chapter in America's history that ushered in the nuclear age, determined how the next war, the Cold War, would be fought, and served as an organizational model behind the remarkable achievements of American big science during the second half of the 20th century. The advance of nuclear science has given rise to nuclear energy and medicine, as well as radioactive waste and health problems. The Manhattan Project and its legacies are complex as the science that made the project possible.